You ready to do some art? We got to do some art today. So let's just go on over to the studio and get started. You got your bone? So it is World Watercolor Month of July, and I am starting a brand new sketchbook. I'll link it below what kind it is. It is a watercolor sketchbook. I'm using a picture that I took from my own garden as the very first painting in my sketchbook. It's just going to be a loose floral, and it's not going to be too realistic, but I just want to break in my sketchbook. I want to not, get that fear of the blank page that so many artists get. I don't have that fear. I've never had that fear. I've always been like, oh yeah, that's an opportunity for some art. So I got that picture of my little bee. I did a nice black mixture with brown and blue, painted his bottom. Now I'm just doing a little bit of yellow for his thorax, for his little fuzzy yellow part, and then some more of that black mixture. You can use tube black. I don't usually use it. It's a little flat for me. So I just mixed a nice dark blue and a nice dark brown to get sort of a black color, and I am just going along and getting in the little segments. I'm doing that by leaving a little bit of the white of the paper in between each of his little body segments down there, also leaving some of the white of the paper as a highlight. And that just gives it a little bit of shape, a little bit of dimension when you do that. Anytime you use shading, you get a better form or better dimension in your painting. Just think of your lights and your darks. I preach that. I preach light and dark, light and dark. That is what gives you realism and form and shape. Then I took a little bit of brown and maroon and mixed it together for his wings. His wings kind of had a marownish. Is that maroon and brown together? Maroon. A little bit of maroon. I'm still saying it. A little bit of maroon and brown together for the leaves. Now the center of the flower is a nice bright sort of cadmium yellow, or you could use lemon yellow or whatever yellow you have, just whatever you got. Then I mixed a little bit of the yellow and a little bit of a rose color to get kind of a bright orange, because the center of these flowers, now these are purslane flowers, and it blooms profusely. I love purslane. Purslane is like so reliable with their blooms. Now the blooms only last a day, but there's so many of them. They just continually bloom throughout the heat. They love the heat. So I really like those types of flowers. They're kind of like a succulent. So I just did like a base coat of a opera pink on those petals. Then I'm coming back with a deeper permanent rose to do some shadows, and just to do a little bit of the texture of the petals, but just mostly doing some shadows. Now I wet these petals first. I put in the opera rose, let it dry. Now I'm just coming back in right on top of that dry opera rose and doing some layers of permanent rose just for the shadows. Where I want to pick up some of the pigment, I'm just wiping my brush on my paper towel to dry it off, and then coming back with that damp dry brush and picking up the pigment, and then just wiping it off onto the kitchen towel or paper towel, whatever you call it. Or if you just use a regular terry towel or sponge, whatever you use to sort of control the water on the tip of your brush, then that's what you use, and I'm just showing you what I use. I'm also taking clean water, and around the edges of some of these shadows, I'm just going with the clean water to sort of blend that out, smooth out the edge so that it's not such a hard edge. And I'm just working my way around the petals. I'm just trying to get in the blocks of shadows where I see, and the little tones and the different types of highlights that you see in those petals. And you can see they're kind of jiggity jaggedy, and I'm just taking a little bit of clean water and smoothing out some of those hard edges while it's still wet, so it gives a softer blend. I like that softer blend a lot better than the hard edges. Now sometimes you need a hard edge, like for a shadow or something like that, but in this case the softer edges go a little bit better with the subject matter of the flower petals. Now I'm going with a little bit of bright yellow down in the center of this blossom. And then I went ahead and put some of that permanent rose, mixed it with the yellow to get kind of a bright orange. I'm just pulling some of that orange up into the petals with the very tip of my brush to make it look like little hair marks. It's not really hair marks, it's just sort of texture, but that's what it reminds me of. And I'm going around each petal as I do that. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing on this sort of flower that's kind of peeking out of the side of the paper. I put a little bit of orange in the center, and then I'm just taking some of that pink color and putting that first layer of color on those petals. We're going to let that dry. I put a little extra yellow over there and just leaving that alone now. Then I'm going to work my way around the petals of this one. Now that orange is still wet, so you see it's kind of bleeding into my pink, and that's okay. It's no big deal. Once you get all those in there, let that dry. Once you get all of that pink on each one of the petals, let it dry. While it's drying, I went and mixed up a nice yellow green, kind of a greenish yellow color. And I'm just going to do that first layer on the leaves. Purslane leaves are little oval shaped leaves. They're really cute. I like the way that their leaves are shaped, and they're just kind of packed onto the branches. Like I said, it looks, I think it's a succulent. If it's not a succulent, it should be, because that's what it reminds me of. And I'm just going to go ahead and get all of those green leaves, that first layer painted. I did add a little maroon around the edges of some of the leaves, because some of those leaves do have a little bit of a maroon edge. And I'm coming back in with a little bit of a darker green and going down that center vein with it. You can do that while it's still damp. Just make sure that it is a little bit dry, like it's not completely wet, or else that center vein will just spread out and you'll lose the definition of it. So just be mindful to let it dry some before you do that. And I'm coming back with my black mixture once those leaves are dry, once the petals are dry, and I'm just painting in his legs. He has some little black legs. They have highlights coming out from them. He is clinging on to that little blossom. He is getting all that pollen and some of the nectar. He's going to take it back, and I don't know what he's going to do with it, but he's going to do something with it. He's not a honeybee, so I don't think he's going to make honey with it. This is a bumblebee. So I don't know what they do with it. I guess I need to check up on that. And I'm coming back and adding some darker shadows to his wings. And as you can see, his wings are translucent, so you can see the petal underneath. And I put a little more veins on that. You can see his body through this wing that is facing us, that's closest to the viewer. You can see that little dark shadow in there. I left a little bit of the white of the paper shining through for a highlight on those wings. Wings are tricky. If I was doing it more realistic, I would have taken more care with it. But this is just a quick sort of painting I wanted to do just to break in my sketchbook, my very first painting in this sketchbook. And I intend to try to do some sketchbook work in it pretty regularly. This is July, the World Watercolor Month, and I may go over there to the World Watercolor page and take some of their prompts and maybe do a few of them. I don't know. I haven't decided. Also, if you are a member of my Patreon, I share monthly prompts at the beginning on the first of every month. I post prompts for the month to help you if you don't know, what to paint. You get stuck. We all get there sometimes where we're just stuck and we don't know what we want to paint. So I give some prompts to help kind of give you some inspiration, and I also provide a PDF. You can download that. So go on over to my Patreon and get that if you'd like. Also, World Watercolor page also has their prompts for this month, so you can go to them as well. They are really a great page to follow, a great team to follow. I like that. Doodle Wash, I think, is the one that may have started that. So check out Doodle Wash as well. Now you see I have done a lot of shadow work here with some darker rose on these petals. I've tried to see where the texture is and do little tiny lines for the texture. And then I'm just doing shapes and shadows across the petal where I see those. I'm using the technique called glazing. Glazing is where you paint a color, let it dry completely, and you can either paint the same color over it to get a deeper version of that color, or you can do a completely different color over it to kind of change the color of it. So if I wanted to change the color, I could easily do a yellow wash over it and I would get orange. It would look orange instead of pink. But I chose to do pink because of course these are pink petals and I'm not trying to change the color. I'm just trying to get in some of the shadows. Now I'm coming back down to this other blossom and I'm coming and putting in a little bit more of the orange. When I did that wet into wet, it kind of lost that center part that I had there, those little lines and texture that I had going. So I'm just coming back and just painting them back in. It's no big deal. Again, this is just a sketch in my sketchbook. This is not meant to be hyper realistic. It's just for fun. It's a way to sort of break in my sketchbook and just, you know, get started. Once you get that first page done in your sketchbook, then hey, the rest of them seem to be so much easier. And some tips for starting a sketchbook. Decide what you want to do with this sketchbook. This one I'm probably going to paint scenes from my garden in, different types of nature things. That's what I think I'm going to use as the theme for this sketchbook. And I think I'm going to use it as completely watercolor with just maybe a little bit of mixed media, but all the mixed media will be like watercolor pencils or some type of liquid media. I'm not going to do any dry media in this book, I think. So you want to decide what you're going to put in your book, how you're going to use it, and you can use it in multiple ways. You can use it as like a journal. You can use it just to try different techniques out, different types of materials, different types of paint or pencil or pen or whatever. So you want to decide that first and just keep it handy. Try to schedule time to work in your sketchbook every day if you can, but if you can't, at least designate 1 or 2 days a week where you at least work an hour in your sketchbook. But sketchbooks are handy tools. You can take it with you. You can sketch people while you're waiting on, I don't know, a bus, or while you're in public transportation, while you're waiting at the doctor's appointment, something like that. If you go to the park, you can whip it out, and that's why I like to keep my sketchbook smaller so I can carry it around with me. You can whip it out and paint something that you see on site in plain air. Just keep you a small little kit of watercolors, or even just a pencil or a pen, depending on, you know, what is convenient for you. But yeah, I always try to decide what I'm going to do with my sketchbook before I start it. What kind of things am I going to paint in it? What is it going to be its purpose? That is the main guide for me. And this one is just going to be to practice watercolor, maybe do a few other types of water media in here. And I'm probably going to stick to the theme of nature, but I may not. It's my sketchbook. I can make the rules and I can break them. Same with you and your sketchbook. But it does help knowing going in what you plan on doing with it. So I just decided to do this cute little bee. I'm doing it in mostly watercolor. At the end, I am going to use a little bit of my watercolor pencils. I wanted to try those out to see how they work and see if it gives any, you know, more definition, or just how they work on top of traditional watercolor is the main thing I want to see, how it's going to work. And I'll find out here at the end, and I'll show you, of course, that I filmed it, so don't worry, you're not going to miss it. So now I got a deep maroon, and I'm just coming in there and putting some tiny little texture dots, putting in some shadows that breaks up that big center of the flower. It gives a little bit more definition in the middle there of the blossom. As you can see, I've already added some of the shadows with a little bit more of that hot pink on each of the petals. Now I'm just taking a little bit of white gouache and lightening up some of those highlights just to see how that works. I'm not crazy about it, but I'm not worried about it. Again, this is just a practice. It's an experiment. So I'm not getting too crazy about how that looks, not worrying about it too much. I decided to put a background on here, and all I'm doing is just taking a nice deep blue. It's, I think that is a mix of indothricin, I can't even say it, blue, and a little bit of, not indothricin blue. Anyway, it's a dark blue with a little bit of indigo mixed into it. It's almost the color of brand new non-washed blue jeans. It's like a brand new blue jean color. And then once I get that in there, while it's still just a tiny bit wet, I've dropped a few drops of clean water, and that's just going to give it like a star texture. So I'm basically causing blooms to happen on purpose just to give it some texture. A lot of times people wanted to avoid blooms, but as you see, I'm putting my own blooms in there because I want that texture. I want a little bit of visual interest. I wanted to see how it would look. Again, this is my little experiment in my own little book, and I'm just sharing it with you. Hopefully you can learn a few things from watching and maybe encourage you to start your own new sketchbook in July. So I'm just going to work my way around each one of these in these little tiny spaces in between the flowers. Then I'm just dropping clean water in there and doing that to get that texture, to cause some blossoms. It also looks really good when you do those blossoms if you're trying to do like a frosty window pane or something like that. That's a good little technique to do for those as well. I like this blue. This blue looks really pretty with this green and this pink. They all just look so good together to me, in my opinion. Now, you might not like it, so you can do your own things. And now we've finished. We've got that dry. I've got my watercolor pencils out. And in some of the areas with the black, I'm just darkening up some of those areas. I drew in his little antenna. And now I'm just shading in some of the areas around his legs and on his body with my black, I want to say colored pencil, but it's a watercolor pencil. It's water soluble. I'm going to take some of the darker green, add some shadows on some of the leaves. I'll also try to activate that with a little bit of clean water and my watercolor brush just to smooth it out some. You don't have to do that. If you like the texture of the watercolor pencil, then just leave it. You don't have to reactivate it or activate it. I'm taking the white watercolor pencil. I'm adding some highlights to his wings, some on his abdomen, just wherever. I'm also coming and adding a little bit more of highlights on the leaves. And the good thing about this pencil is the pink still shows through it, so it does lighten the pink, but it doesn't go stark white, which would look unnatural. So I really like that. And of course, in some of the areas, I am going ahead and activating that pencil with a little bit of water. Just clean water right over the pencil, and that softens it and blends it. So pretty. I like the pencil much better than I liked doing it with the regular gouache. So yeah, the pencil is definitely the way to go. I really like the way it turned out, better than trying to paint it with liquid gouache or the regular paint gouache. So like I said, this is an experiment. I'm trying some different things. I'm darkening up some areas with a little bit of the pink. I decided it'll be a little bit darker there, so I just added a shadow. And then I'm coming in and lightening up some of these highlights here again with my white watercolor pencil. And I like the look of that. I like it better. Now this is not like one of my best paintings ever, so don't be too hard on me. Again, this is just my sketchbook. I'm not trying to make a masterpiece. I'm just practicing, enjoying the process, and that is what art is really all about. Yeah, if you get a really good product in the end or a really good piece of art, then hey, that is icing on the cake. But for me, the fun part is the experimenting, the process of just trying different things out. And every time I do, I learn something. I mean, I'm still learning. I am going to be a lifelong learner, and every time I pick up a paintbrush or a pencil, I learn something. As long as I'm out there trying, I'm going to continue learning. And so I encourage you to experiment as well. Now I'm just going in and giving some shadows, and that gives a little more definition to these leaves and a little bit more form to them. And you can either leave it like that, or again, you can take your watercolor brush and smooth that out if you want. I'm also just adding some marks into that blossom below with some red watercolor pencil coming out from that center. And I'm going to put a few on this top blossom as well. just to make sure I keep everything sort of unified and looking like it goes together. I'm just going to smooth out some of this green, not all of it, but I'm just going to smooth it out with some clean water on my damp brush. Again, that's optional. If you like the texture of the watercolor pencil, just leave it. You don't have to do this part. But I'm just experimenting, so I wanted to see if it would look any better. It looks about the same. I'm not unhappy with it. And now I'm just taking a white gel pen, and where I want some really white highlights on those wings and down his body and on his little legs, I'm just using my white gel pen to put those in, and just a few highlights here and there. Not a lot. I don't want to overdo it. I just put in a few here and there. And there we go. I think I'm done. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. And I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.